Giant stalker, dragon stalker, crypt stalker, demon stalker, rift stalker, grown stalker, crypt stalker, scourge stalker, wind runner. I'm a pony, lead skill hunter, a death dealer, a life stealer. That's just the cost of being.
Welcome to episode 153 of the Hunting Party Podcast. This is Euripides from WoW Insider, out TPS and Call to Auction.
And I'm Dark Brew from. I am Dark Brew from. Dark Brew awesome. I am Dark Brew, the brewhall.com and the Brewhall on Twitter. You know, I was thinking before that, I haven't podcasted in a couple weeks, so maybe I'll be a little rusty. But then the other part of my brain is saying, well, this is the 153rd time I've had to say that line. So it should be an issue.
Just so as to show that, no matter how many times you do something, there's always room for error.
I psyched myself out.
How amazing would it be if they had a .awesome TLD?
That would be cool.
Because right now they're all based on countries, but now they've opened it up to sort of free form whatever you want. So it costs a lot of money. I could make a .Euripides if I wanted to, but it would be like $150,000. So it's expensive enough that it's supposed to be for countries and big organizations and companies only. But somebody should make a .awesome TLD, and we could put the entire Hunter blogosphere in there.
That would be great.
And I'm Frostime from Warcraft Hunters Union, WoW Insider, and the WoW Hunters Hall.
And I'm Alexander from the Hunting Party Podcast. No, I'm kidding. I'm not Alexander. That wasn't Frostime, in case you were wondering. That was actually Alexander, who likes to steal missing people's lines. Speaking of missing people, I am going to be out next week. As a Canadian, of course, all Canadians are communists. I will be visiting my my comrades in the Caribbean, sitting on a beach in Cuba, which is something that I can do. You can, yes, Cuba.
Yes, I know. We that is one place that here in the United States we cannot go is Cuba.
Yep.
So have you been there before, or is this your first trip there?
It's my first trip there. I've been to the Caribbean before, but never Cuba. It's very big in Europe. Like Germans like going to Cuba, Swiss like going to Cuba. It's also very big in Canada, but obviously they don't get a lot of business from the U.S. So, anywho, that's where I'm going to be next week, and Frostheim will hopefully be back by then.
Yeah, hopefully.
Today is Saturday, December 8, 2012. If you want to participate in the chat room, just type "I love my hunter" in the chat window, and you'll be prompted to register. Actually, that was Dark Brew's line. Sorry.
That was Dark Brew. Oh, yeah, you're not sorry.
I'm stealing everybody's lines today. You watch out, Euripides.
Uh-oh. Well, since I can't see the chat room, Dark, do you want to go through Frost's read-through?
Oh, sure. Let's see, joining us, and I haven't refreshed, so I'm going to miss like half the people here, but that's okay. We've got Stormovic, Eiley Gerwolf, BM Jaeger, Habtor, Hobbs on Choice, Hot Shot. I never get that one right. Hot Shot Gun. Induates, Lamb Chop, Serifiner, Slugslinger, Sneer 07, Trestle, and a whole bunch of other people that are just here visiting, and probably a whole bunch of other people that are registered, but whose names aren't showing up in my window either. So, but we got a full house today, minus Frost.
Yep, and if you want to send a question that we'll answer during the Q&A session, you can send a private message to Ollie Sonder, who will rank your questions however she bloody well pleases this week, because Frostheim is not here to recommend one.
I want to know what dailies you're doing and hate the most, so I can avoid them.
Oh, fair enough. Okay, so we have some announcements to make. You may not have noticed, but on Twitter and YouTube and the Warcraft Hunters Union, you will find links to the long-promised and quickly delivered, at least very quickly, one after another, Hunter songs, at least 3 of them so far. So that was a Hunter open collaboration, the Love Song, and my personal favorite, the Boom Diata song.
Yeah, they're all really, really good. And I don't remember how many. Was that all the songs the Kickstarter was going to generate, or was there going to be another one? I can't remember how many songs we were going to get.
I think it's more than 3. I think it's more than 3. I don't remember exactly myself either, but I seem to remember thinking of something in the realm of 5. But to be honest, I was. Oh yeah, we have an update to the Hunter song because right now it's missing a bunch of tears and stuff, and it's using references to the parts of the game that don't exist anymore. But my personal favorite so far has to be the Boom Diata song, mostly because I really like that commercial for Discovery when I first saw it, and it just really suits us. In case you haven't heard it yet, the Boom Diata song, the Hunter Boom Diata song, is an adaptation, a lovingly crafted adaptation of that commercial for Discovery, where they're saying all the kind of different things that they love with the catchy little Boom Diata in the background. And this has been adapted to the Hunter blogosphere. And if you listen real carefully, you'll hear basically every single person who writes about or theory crafts hunters or plays hunters it has been on the show. And, you know, Frost really spent a lot of time getting people to send him audio clips. I remember when he was collecting these, how much trouble it was. Because first of all, if you ask anyone to sing, their answer is going to be no. And if you push them really hard and then they get it back to you, it's going to be, you know, it's not going to be the right pitch and the tenor. So he had to have all that stuff professionally edited by Balthazar. And just the final result is just so amazing. It is just really, I watched that. He posted it at like 11 o'clock at night, and I saw it for the first time. I'm like, this is quite possibly the most awesome thing I have ever seen. And he made a nice video to go along with it.
Yeah, he really did. And really just the work, I don't think we can, you know, state how awesome a job that Balthazar did in piecing all that together, because it's not like we all got into the room and did a We Are the World kind of thing. These are just you know, people sitting at their individual computers by themselves recording little clips and different audio qualities, as you said, different notes, different tones, different pitches, and then just sending them all in to him. And Balthazar had to basically go in there and, you know,
make us sound
like,
awesome.
Yeah, like we're all on the same wavelength. You know, you turn me, like, which I probably sound like a sick cat singing "We Love Our Podcast."
You sounded fine, and there was one person I couldn't tell who it was, but they had a really good singing voice. They had the little tremolo going on and everything. Like most of us are just sort of flat because we don't sing unless we have to. But you know that song came out sounding really awesome.
Yeah, it was really good. And I think one thing, as you listen to it, and I think Frost mentioned this on this blog post too, that the project started like, I don't know, maybe 3 years back. Maybe it was 2 years back, but it was a while ago. So if you're wondering like where are some of the more recent hunters, why aren't they, you know, participating in the song? It's just that they, you know, weren't really around doing what they're doing now back then when he started it. So he collected the stuff all the clips in a relatively short period of time. But it just took this long to be able to find the time and the people to actually produce it and put it together. So, you know. Yeah,
well, and that's the thing is part of this, and it sounds like this is one of the ones that they spent the most time on because obviously of how much work it involved making everything sound proper. It's really, I forget where I was going with that. I went off on a tangent and I've forgotten. Anyways, moving on.
But that one was good. And then I don't know if you listened to the love song or not. That turned out to be like 100 times better than I thought it was going to be. I know both you and I weren't too thrilled when that was the one choice that, you know, kind of made it into the list. But it's very bouncy. It's very catchy. It's a really nice song. That's got to be one of my favorites as well.
Yeah, I was pleasantly surprised, I have to say.
And the artwork in the video is really nice too. With all the pictures of everybody.
You know, Frostheim had, you know, various hunters just send in pictures of them and their pets, and there were some really creative shots, some really nice shots, some of the cool looking pets and everything, and so very, very well done. That's a nice video, so you should definitely check them all out for sure.
Definitely. So next up on the list, I guess this is no longer an announcement. We're into the realm of news here, but there was a bug fix. Or are we done on the Kickstarter songs, or did we have
I think so. I don't think there's too much else to say. Just that they're all out there on YouTube, and hopefully we'll get another song or two out of this. I can't remember, like you said, how many we were slated for, but yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll find out soon enough. So in the actual game, there is a bug that was fixed. Improved Serpent Sting now deals the correct amount of damage is the text of the bug fix. Unfortunately, I never got to see the bug's amount. Was it too low, too high? I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know, and it's surprised that they didn't. Well, I'm maybe not surprised they didn't tell us, but yeah, so that's what's missing here. We don't know if the damage was too high or if it was too low, and I guess now it's just right, but we don't know where it may or may not have been.
What I suspect is this is probably related to the change they put in last, I guess, hotfix or patch or whatever. They increased the damage of Serpent Sting across the board and then reduced the damage of the initial application because when you do a Serpent Spread as survival, basically that serpent that immediate damage from Serpent Sting is it can be quite high. And because Serpent Sting damage was going up so much, they didn't want to make survival AoE, which is already very strong. They didn't want to make it even stronger. So I think they went and I think what might have happened is they did say that they were planning on reducing that to basically have the old values.
Right.
But they may have forgotten to do that, and they had to hotfix that in.
That's what I
had to guess.
Suspect too, yeah, that they forgot to normalize it, to take into account the improvements they did for the regular Serpent Sting. I guess you talked about that last week. I mean, is that worth now spending time multi-dotting ads?
Oh yeah, yeah. We had I think Sahara on the show, if I remember correctly, and we were absolutely the decision. The recommendation now is to do multi-dotting. So. If you're obviously as survival, you'd probably use your multi-shot in order to do that. But at BM, it's worth just throwing up because the price has gone down, the damage has gone up. There's no reason not to, in cleave situations, throw up another Sting.
Okay, that makes sense. And there's some encounters where that would think that could be worthwhile, like the Stone Guard fight when you get the two of them right next to each other. That it would make sense to put up a Sting on each one of those.
Yep.
Obviously it's a little bit of thought going into maintaining it, making sure it doesn't drop off.
The thing is, it only costs a very small amount of focus now to reapply it.
Yeah, that's what I like about it too. So it's a little bit more forgiving if, depending on what you've got cooking, you don't want to necessarily throw in a Cobra shot just to refresh it. You might be okay. Is it okay, I guess, to let it drop off and then just reapply it immediately?
Yeah. I had barely logged into the game at all since we last podcasted. Unfortunately, I've had sort of a crazy couple of weeks at work, and I'm still struggling to remember the outcome of the last episode, and I haven't had a chance to go and test it myself, unfortunately. So apparently, go ahead.
I was just say just to add on to that, one thing I have noticed though, I don't know if it was just patch 5.1 or one of the hot fixes. Maybe it was one of the hot fixes, but I've noticed that like fire mages kind of got kicked in the junk there with their DPS, and I've noticed in our runs that we, at least with our fire mage, we can now keep up with him and potentially beat him on the meters on some fights. It's much tighter than it was before.
Well, how many times are you misdirecting to him though?
That would be all of it. He's a very good fire mage, and I'm not going to complain if a very good fire mage is consistently ahead of other players, but it was patch 5.1 that delivered the nerf bat to the genitals of fire mages, and it's something that Frostheim seemed to be pretty happy about last time, but not in the sense that he's personally vindictive against fire mages per se, just in the sense that he feels that as an outlier to DPS, by putting them back in line with everybody else, even if they're still quite good and likely to be top on many fights, this makes the middle of the pack a little bit closer to where we are without actually increasing our DPS. That said, they did increase our DPS as we discussed last week. Yeah. So
exactly. So I thought I was kind of pleased. In some ways, I was pleased to see it. In other ways, because it's our run. That's less DPS that's going out overall. So
and that's the thing.
Not
right?
ideal either.
Looking at it from the perspective of somebody who is in a specific group of specific players that will not change their roster anytime soon, it's not a good thing, because now the overall DPS is lower if the mage's DPS is lower, which may be compensated depending on the number of hunters you brought. However, looking at it from the perspective of, on average, on other, looking at all the runs that are done by all the players in the game, this means hunters are more likely to get a raid spot, as an example. And if you have a choice between two equally geared, or here's a good example, if a player has an equally geared hunter and mage, at this point they can, it's not always bring the mage unless we've already got two kind of situation.
Right.
So.
And if you're missing a buff that the hunter can bring, then that might even slide the decision in favor of bringing the hunter.
Yep. So, Ghostcrawler, who has...
Actually, we have a Frostheim report.
Oh, okay.
He is currently running back to his corpse after Ustream attacked him. So, go Ustream, because clearly you must be Horde. Yeah. Was trying to get Ustream to work, ended up losing the ability to hear anything at all from my sound card, so... Ow.
Oh, Frostheim.
Oh, boy.
Tell him he can install Skype on his phone if he's interested. That just generally works. That's how I do it. So while we're waiting for Frostheim to figure out how computers compute, Ghostcrawler took an opportunity to go and visit the guys over on All Things Azeroth. Now, this is awesome. First of all, the people from Blizzard have started making the rounds on the podcast community, which to me is amazing. This is a huge departure from what we've seen from them before. The official line from Blizzard's PR people has always been, keep the developer contacts to, either live in person at events or through whatever is officially communicated, on those water cooler dev blogs and whatnot, which has been, a lot better than it has been in the past. But in their ongoing the direction that they're moving in is really communicating more with the players, letting us see how they make the decisions and taking our input. They've decided to open it up to things like podcasts. So, I'm a little bit upset that they chose All Things Azeroth instead of the Hunting Party podcast, because clearly there are more hunters than there are anything else in this game.
Well, I was going to say the same thing. It's exciting to see them do this, except that we don't seem to be on the list here. So, well,
and to be completely fair, this is a very niche, if incredibly important and awesome and cool podcast. But it's like one of the classes. And so I don't know if we'll ever see anyone from Blizzard on it, but it's good to know that, the podcasts that represent all of the support classes, as Frostheim likes to call them, the lesser classes, as I like to call them once in a while when I'm trying to, troll someone, are getting some attention and some. What's awesome is that these people talk about the game every week, month, whatever, and they're really they've got their fingers on the pulse of the game. They're constantly immersed by it, and in terms of. Like if you're just going to be answering questions on Twitter and on the forums, that's going to be coming from a lot of random players. And as we know, the ones who are motivated enough to write on Twitter or the forums will sometimes be a little bit angry. So I think that means that's kind of one of the things that we see a lot in the developer communication with the player base, is that they're responding to trolls, which is something I never really understood. Like if somebody's just sitting there being negative and saying, "Screw this, I'm going to Star Wars." Or second guessing everything they say and like arguing about it once they get their answer. I think it kind of makes sense to take this to the world of podcasts, where we all clearly love the game. In our case, we could take or leave, but the hunter we love. And but it's a situation where the kind of questions that they're going to come up with, I think, are pretty strong. So on that note, All Things Azeroth, we have some highlights. You want to run through them?
Sure. Just a couple of things that, of course, the whole interview, but it's like, things that I guess generally interest to us. They talked about transmogging of legendary items, and this is still under debate, but they said it was somewhat likely for the future. So in other words, they would allow players to transmog legendary items if they have them, which I think that's fine. I mean, I never really understood why they wouldn't want you to do that, especially if you've gone through all the trouble of earning it, and it's not like, well, other than the the hunter bow, which is just a random drop, but most of those other things require a fair bit of work in a guild that needs to put you up on your shoulders and carry you through that, to run you through, to help you get it done.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, that's one of the things that I always wondered as well. These legendary weapons are a reward that basically gives you something, at least in recent times, gives you something slightly better than what you could get through heroics. And so, the usage, it's there. It takes a ridiculous amount of effort and sometimes luck to earn one of these things. And the benefit is only there for basically a couple of expansions. Like, I remember that healing mace that was so popular in Ulduar or whatever, became pretty much, I guess, sort of almost basically the same as what you would get in ICC. And like people were still using it when they had it, but sometimes they wouldn't, depending on whether it was really an advantage or not. And that was a kind of a situation where, yeah, they got a couple of months of use out of this thing that took them forever to build, and it was a huge personal achievement. But they never really, it didn't have any permanent. Aside from the achievement, which you can't really wear around every day, it didn't have any permanent sort of, I guess, remembrance of that. So this is something that I fully support. I think if you have the legendary and you've gone through the trouble of earning it, you should be able to turn whatever weapon you're currently using into that legendary,
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Like I said, it's a lot of effort, and you should be able to just sort of hang on to that reward and show it off, whenever you want.
Yep, that would be nice. So the next highlight that was picked, Ghostcrawler was saying, more players are expected to try challenge modes after they finish things they're currently working on. I guess this must have been in response to a question, what's up with challenge modes? Because I've done a few of them because I wanted to see what it was, but nothing came out of it so, I guess, important or memorable. Aside from doing it for the content, it's like basically you get a couple of Valor points, and it takes a fairly long time, so there are faster ways to get Valor points. And once you're raiding, at that point, it seems like there's not really a whole lot of reason to go in them. Of course, I know they've been upgrading the rewards lately, but it seems here like this is something he's really putting in more as just sort of a pastime. Or that do you remember whether he said anything about the rewards for challenge modes?
No, I don't know, and I guess it sort of stood out to me just a little bit, and that I'm wondering if people have been complaining or wondering if there's been issues with people maybe not running or not choosing to run them, either because they feel that they're too hard, or it's just a secondary thing to do, and they've got too much else to occupy their time in game. Which just getting Valor capped each week and doing whatever raids is enough to eat up your time. So I guess maybe, like I said, they're looking at this as something, well, once people achieve all those other things that they want to do, then yes, we anticipate that they'll go and use this as an activity to kind of occupy their time next.
Yeah, and I'm I'm a little bit behind the curve. I read challenge modes. I said challenge modes, but in my mind I was discussing scenarios. I don't think I've done a challenge mode yet. I'm like you said, I'm never capped week over week on Valor. I barely have time to do LFR, and my number one priority is to try and make my 2 night a week raids. So it's not something that I've had the bandwidth to try yet. So challenge modes are, I guess, when you go back and do heroics with specific challenges to try and get them done faster, or with
right. Those are the 5-mans that they put in there that are, your gear gets nerfed down to like 463 eye level, so you can't gear up for them per se, and they're harder difficulty. So you need to go in there with a pretty set group, communicate UCC, and then there's rewards for getting them faster. There's timed rewards, etc. And then all the stuff you get out of there,
don't they?
Yeah, I think there's a leaderboard as well.
Okay.
So it's a very neat concept for people that are looking for a real challenging content, and they said they like the difficulty level where it's at. They don't plan on nerfing it to make it more easy for players. It's set up the way it is for a sort of a singular purpurpose.
It's interesting because go ahead.
I said, but I haven't had a chance to I haven't tried to step into one of those, but I mean, maybe after the raid's tier's gone and you're waiting for the next raid to come out, that might be a way something to do.
Yeah. Well, and something to do is an interesting way to put it, because it seems to me like they've made the mistake a few different times of building something that's just really, really cool, entertaining, interesting, fun, but then because it's so good, not giving it a proper in-game, formal reward. Like they'll give things like, position on the leaderboard, or, vanity items or achievements or whatever. But, sometimes things that are considered really fun and really cool, they want to be careful about rewarding players for doing them too much. So they're perfectly fine giving us rewards from doing dailies, right? So going and killing the same, set of mobs, or some subset of the same available quests every day in order to get your reputation, in order to get your entry level epics, that's something that they're okay with because it seems a little bit less fun, so it's allowed to have a bigger reward. But something that could be really challenging and interesting and fascinating, they're careful about rewarding. And in my opinion, I think that's actually backwards. I think you should take the content that has the most potential fun and the least potential grindy feeling to it, and make that where people should be spending their effort in order to be competitive towards some goal. As an example, if you're a raider, like you said, you got to cap your valor points every week. You attend your raids every week. You got to do LFR every week. And if you were getting into raiding at first, when you guys were hitting, when you're hitting these gear checks, you have to be trying to get your reputations up so you could get those entry level epics. Fill out the spots that you're missing from whatever else. If instead of making that, go and grind, August Celestial's rep, or go and grind this rep or that rep, they could have made that, go and get really good at challenge modes, or get really good at one of these other fun new features that they've put in that nobody's playing yet because they just don't have time with all the other work that they've got to do.
Yeah, and I mean, the rewards, like I said, are mostly cosmetic. I mean, there's mounts and things you can get, and there's gear, but it's really just for transmog, and of course, it has cool animations and effects, but it's there for show, and kind of things that make you look cool.
Yeah. So you want to take the next highlight here?
Yeah, so the next thing they were talking about said, ideally, guilds that aren't able to finish every raid on Heroic will still be able to finish one or two of the Heroic raids in this tier. And then he said upgrading gear and touched gems should hopefully help with this. So, and later on down, just to add to that, they were saying that they're not sure that they're going to go ahead and nerf the raid content this time around like they did. Like they tend to do towards the end of the patch.
Yeah, because then there's always a question, did you get it pre-nerf or post-nerf? And that's not often tracked properly, or it's not obvious when you look at a guild whether they got something pre or post-nerf unless you happen to remember exactly the date of the nerf. I like the idea. I mean, a nerf to content can be accomplished just as easily by an increase to player power, and that's, I think, what he's getting at here. So Shaw touched gems and upgrading gear just from doing the content.
Yeah, and it's just sort of interesting to see what his expectation is of how guilds that are raiding are likely to do.
I have a funny story about nerf content if you are interested.
Sure.
All this while we've been podcasting, I forgot that I had not logged out of WoW. A Darkspire Spyron has been beating on me for half hour, and I'm still alive.
Nice. Well, nerfed content, that'll do it for you.
Yeah. But yeah, I was say the upgrading of the gear is sort of an interesting new mechanic now. And of course, I mean, obviously to upgrade any significant amount of gear is going to take more time than I think you would possibly have before the next set of content comes out. So I don't know how beneficial that'll be to helping guilds progress through some of the harder raids.
It's an incremental change, but I think if there's a lot of guilds that are, at one particular block that's really can be fixed by gear. Obviously, I'm sure the block is more than just gears. There are very few actual gear checks in the game, but if they're at a problem where they just can't get the right people on reliably to accomplish a certain task, then having more gear can make up for that kind of thing. So this is something that eventually will push them into a couple of heroics, and it sounds like that's the direction they want to go in.
Yeah, and I guess obviously they aren't expecting each and everybody that chooses to raid and do progression to clear everything.
Yeah, and that's to be expected.
But I would say now, the way they've done it, there's probably enough incentive that even when the next tier comes out, to maybe want to go back and finish up some of that old content and do it on heroic. I mean, I would think doing which one is the last raid, Terrace of the Endless Spring in heroic, just to get the shot touched weapon, the best available one, which is used for the legendary quest line, would be something you would want to do.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's something. I suspect that as long as that continues to be available, people will continue to run it, even if it's trivial. So we have some other highlights here. Is this still part of the interview, or is this?
This was part of the same interview, and he started talking. I guess they asked some questions about patch 5.2, which would be the next tier patch, and what would be coming along with that. So there's some few interesting things there. One of the things they talked about was like their development cycle and how long they were thinking it would take to do. And what he said was a rough idea of how long patches will take. They said 2 months for a content patch like 5.1. And then 4 months for a patch with a new raid and PvP season, which would be 5.2. But he qualified that, and he said, this is just a rough target as there are many factors involved in determining when players are ready and when the content is ready.
I don't like that. I've said before, this game goes too fast. And
yeah,
I remember I used to play EverQuest when I was in high school, and it was something where it was like one of the first MMOs that I'd ever seen. I think it was the first actual MMO. And, you know, I went back to a buddy's house who had been playing it this entire time because he's weird like that. And, you know, he had every single expansion, and they took up a whole bookshelf. There was like, I don't know, 10 or 20 of them or something. And I'm just like, really? That's what this turned into? How much did you spend on all these? And, you know, if they keep on releasing a new expansion what did they say? They want to do it every year or every 2 years?
I think it's every 2 years is generally the life cycle. At least so far, that's what they've shown. It's been about a 2-year life cycle per expansion.
Okay, well, usually it's three major patches, right? So that's 3 4-month periods plus however many 2-month periods it takes to, I guess, bridge the difference. But they're leaving themselves too much downtime between expansions, like the end of the last patch and the beginning of the new expansion. There's too much time in there.
Yeah, that period, I think, is where they kind of fail a little bit. Like I said, that patch 4.3 came out in December of 2011, and you know, it was 9 months basically that we suffered through that patch, which is a long time.
It's also, I mean, it's always a big patch, right? It gives you a lot to chew on, so it's probably not the end of the world. But, you know, inevitably as people sort of hit that wall and they're like, okay, well, I've done this now. I've seen this content. What's the purpose of trying to do it in heroic? I'm not going to prepare myself for the next tier with it. You know, they've got to, I think they need to take another look at this. But anyways, so the next highlight here is in specifically 5.2. He's talking about some new architecture, geography, and a new story with a new raid, and he's hoping this raid will be similar in quality to Ulduar, and of course 4 daily quests. Similar in quality to Ulduar. That's a pretty heavy. That's a pretty ambitious statement. That's probably my favorite raid that they've ever done.
I remember like that one.
Oh yeah, for sure. I remember I don't remember where it was, but once I was answering a questionnaire, what's your favorite raid, not counting Ulduar? That was that was the question. And I'm just like, yeah, okay, that makes sense. Everybody liked Ulduar.
Yeah, but, that was a fun raid. That was a technically challenging raid. You know, a lot of people think that was sort of the last great work that Blizzard had produced. So I thought Ice Crown was pretty darn good too. At least the Lich King encounter was fun. That just sort of had an epic feel to it. But it would be nice to see that they're kind of recognize what players feel is what their best work is and want to try and, you know, stick to that and emulate that again. I don't know if we lost Euripides there or another thing that was on there too was talking about talent changes. The patch 5.2 will bring more talent changes, but will mostly be numbers tweaks. And he talked about rogue talents are something that needed to be looked at. So I'll be curious to see what they have in mind for the hunter talents and what they want to change and what they want to tweak there.
Yeah, I'm not sure if the hunter talents are actually going to get any changes, but it'll be interesting to see.
But you know, it sounds like, you know, the idea of sort of sweeping class changes, maybe they are not seeing a real need to do that yet at this point in time, and it's really just going to be some minor massaging of things. And it sounds like they want to focus on the talent trees or whatever you want to call them. They're not really trees now, I guess.
Yeah, fair enough. I just lost my what do you call it? My document. So if you want to read the next one.
Yeah, and there was talk about making lesser charms, the current lesser charms, less valuable to discourage hoarding, and then the need to farm them before the patch. So I'm not really sure what they have in mind for that. I know just from the daily quest that I've had to do, or I've got about 11 weeks worth of lesser charm turn-ins. So I don't have to do like another daily for 11 weeks. I'll still be able to get my 3 Elder Coins each week. I mean, that's how quickly those things pile up if you do daily quests every day. It's crazy.
Yeah, I've given up. When I read someplace that Blizzard is just like, you know what, we don't expect everybody to complete all the daily quests. I'm like, oh, and I don't know how, but that seemed to be a trigger in my mind. So I just stopped completely. Right in the middle, I've not done a single daily. Now I've got everything, that I'm going to get from them. And everything. The only thing that's left at this point is epics that I could probably just pick up through LFR. So
right. But that said, the fact that I do have all these already and earn them, I'd hate to see them become worthless at some point too. That would be very annoying.
Yeah. Well, maybe. That would suck. So, let's see here.
Yeah, there was one other note about classes, and they sort of felt that monks are likely the class that needs the most work right now. And then you talked about mistweavers. So I guess just it was just interesting to sort of see what's on their radar as far as classes that might need fixing and are going to get their attention more so than, say, hunters.
Yeah. And another note after here is that there's currently more Retribution Paladins than Rogues. I can attest to that. If I see a Rogue in a random battleground, I usually win, or at least give as good as I get. But if I see a Red Paladin, it's just ridiculous. They are just really good right now. So let's see. He also did a circuit on Gamebreaker TV. So he was talking about the difference in difficulty between 10 and 25 man. He said it is much smaller than it was before. So that's something that is interesting because I think 25s have officially been burned. So many people stopped doing them last expansion that they've. There was no great shift back to 25s, and I don't think that there will be unless 25s become, the risk-reward ratio has to be within the same realm as 10s, if not higher, in order to get people back into them because they're just so hard to organize logistically. I know we stopped doing 25s recently just because of the fact that 10s are where the progression is, not 25s.
Yeah, absolutely.
And, and we're sort of a fairly average guild and a fairly average realm, and that's a pretty representative sample, I think, of where most guilds are. It's really hard to attract 25 solid players away from other 10s where they could be sort of much more likely to be with other really solid players. So you're going to have maybe 15, 20 solid players, and then 5 people that are on alts, or 5 people from from other guilds or whatever that may not know how to play the best. And in order to overcome that, if they want average people running 25s, it has to be easier enough that you either make them 20 or make them easy enough that you couldn't afford to carry people. Of course, that leads to the problem of 25 normal modes being just easily stomped by players that are doing heroics, like 25 heroics. But
right, and I think he went on a different site, Wow Juju or something. I just noticed it and talked about 25 man content further. And specifically, he was asked about what they had done on the Asian realms, where they kind of offered slightly better rewards for doing 25 man than they did for 10. And what he said, what Ghostcrawler had to say, he said it will be interesting to see how the EU and North American players respond to the Asian model. But really, we weren't trying to use Asia as an experiment. It's like we were trying to provide what a lot of the players there say they want, which kind of sounds a lot like what players everywhere want. But and he said, remember that.
But you know what? I was going to say, I'm not sure about that, because I remember a lot of people being really happy when 10s gave the same rewards, and they're like, I will never set foot in a 25 again. And that was just a question of the only reason they were there is because they had to be.
Right. He also said this. He said, remember that the payment model there in the Asian realms is pretty different from what the EU and NA players are used to, which inherently affects how they digest content. So, and he said, as far as the 25-player raids go, we absolutely want to offer some compensation for their increased logistical complexities. So we don't think that just having 25s offer higher level rewards is the right answer, because then it just makes all of the 10-player guilds feel like they have to ramp up to 25. So, this is nothing that they haven't said before, and he's basically said there isn't an easy answer to the problem, but we're going to keep working on it. So they like 25-player rating. In some ways, it offers a better experience than 10s, and they don't want to see it go away. So I guess they're keen on keeping it around, but they're not really sure what to do
it's
about
interesting.
it.
There's a huge, I think, gap here because it's gone. Look at the number of kills in 10 and look at the number of kills in 25. And sure, 25s are still there, but the 10s are there's an order of magnitude. It's 10 to 1. You're 10 times more likely to find somebody who has killed something in 10 heroic than you are in 25 heroic, or 10 normal versus 25 normal. The damage is already gone. The exodus has happened. People are doing 10s. So what he's saying is if he wants to revive 25s, he needs to make something aside from a higher eye level. So that's something that I'm sure there are answers to. I just can't think of any right now.
Yeah, I guess... Oh, go ahead.
Having the LFRs, that a lot of people like me who really we rated because we just wanted to see the content and that was the only way to see it, we don't have to anymore. So there's less people like me looking for a spot in a 10 or 25. So I think overall probably the quality of people in raids better, but less people, if that makes sense.
That does make sense. And when you have less people with the same number of realms, people are more spread out. You're less likely to have the same number of people on, or you're less likely to have a set of players with the same availability, which is really what it takes to make a raid. And yeah, so I don't know. 10 versus 25 is something that we could have a whole show on. In fact, we almost have in the past. So I don't think there's any point in rehashing it now, but it's interesting to see that they are acknowledging that there's a problem.
Yeah.
And if they ever do a good enough job at making 25s work again, then I will happily start recruiting and make the guild 25 again, But it's not going to come at the expense of progression. Let's be honest, even in an average realm, as an average guild, people are kind of looking at you going, okay, so what have you achieved? And, saying, well, I got a bunch of friends together and we have fun every week is not an achievement. An achievement is we are, server 5th on this kill. That's an achievement, even though I don't personally value that as much as I do being able to spend time with friends. But
oh, sure.
That's something that unless we don't lose the ability to say, look at us, we are ranked here with the guilds and we're not an embarrassment, then we're not going back to 25s. Yep. So let's see what else he had here. Okay, sort of talking about raid DPS parses. And he was saying, okay, sampling bias. If all the good players are playing one spec, then the DPS of the other two specs will seem lower. These players are messing around and don't know what they're doing. That is a fair point. I don't know how that came up, but that is something we've talked about a lot before.
Yeah, it's sort of interesting. This is something that, I think Frost has alluded to more than anything, that, and it's like anything. Once you start hearing that one spec is, the best for any particular class, that's what everyone sort of gravitates to, and that's where all your data sort of comes from, and you don't necessarily have good data on the poorer performing specs to really know truly where they stand.
Sorry for the awkward silence. I had to mute my mic again. I keep on having a little visitor who wants to participate in the show.
Oh, that's cute.
Yeah, it's something. So, whenever it comes to raid representation of different DPS specs, the thing is, he may be right in that the number of players picking, it's the whole chicken and the egg question, right? It doesn't mean that just because there is a selection bias that there's no reason for the selection bias. It's just, everybody decided to play Beastmaster because Beastmaster. It's not like that. Everybody chose to play Beastmaster because of advice that they received from others. And it's true that sometimes a small grain of bad advice that seems pretty true can sort of, become a thing that everybody just knows because it's always been true. Like, for example, BM can't raid or SV can't raid or whatever the bad advice of the day is. But that's the kind of thing that won't stand the test of time. If everybody just says, okay, I don't have time to do my research, I'll just take whatever Frostime recommends and just jump right into it there. And then later on, as they're like, okay, so this Fire Mage is going to have my spot next week unless I can figure out a way to get some more damage done. Let's just go and double check that I couldn't be doing more survival. And, we'll go to the target dummies. Of course, everybody says, that's not representative. And they're right, it's not. But it's not completely useless data either. I mean, how well you do unbuffed is going to have some effect. But the other thing is you can often get a certain amount of information from an unbuffed target dummy that would be relevant into the higher levels of buffs and debuffs. Or you could just get some friends with you, and it really doesn't take a lot of players to provide all the really important buffs and debuffs. And then you could see, and my point is eventually, if it became obvious that the common quote-unquote knowledge or the common wisdom about which deck to play was wrong, people wouldn't just keep on playing it suboptimally. Eventually, somebody would, make the switch to survival. Let's say for sake of our, let's pretend Marks. Right now, not many people are playing Marks. Let's pretend for some reason or another that the actual damage of Marks was considerably higher than Beast Mastery, and even everybody's just playing Beast Mastery because of selection bias. Well, the first guy to take his Marks Hunter to a raid would blow away the other hunters, and they would say, wow, that's really awesome. How did he do that? Is there a gear delta? No, he's got less gear than me. Is he got a higher activity time? Is he luckier? What's going on here? Dig into their logs and figure out, no, it's just his spec. He's just hitting harder. Well, let me try it as Marks and see if I can do as well. And then that would spawn its own new advice that everybody would, all of a sudden, you would have a selection bias against BM. So I wouldn't hide behind selection bias as saying that you can't use it to help with your spec balancing issues. I would just say that it is a thing that you have to control for, but it's something that you can control for.
Yeah, it makes sense to me.
Yeah. Now every time I switch applications on this stupid phone to mute my mic when my when my daughter comes in and wants to help, it takes me forever to reopen the episode, so I can't see the call notes. If you want to get the next one.
Yeah, there was just one note here about, says ideally we will never see a 5 or 6 boss raid tier again. So I guess they like having more bosses per tier. I'm just trying to think when they had that. Maybe like Trial of the Crusader was like that. they had like just a few bosses.
So boring.
And then once you learned it, your night was over in an hour, less. Even.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And I'm trying to think of they have done other raids like that. TOC was the worst. That was an example where people were going back and running Ulduar for subpar equipment. Yeah. What was there one in Cataclysm like that? I know they did one.
The beauty of TOC is that you had no trash to get through, or at least not very much.
Yeah, it was a
every
combination
other place
of
you have to wade through hours of trash to get anywhere.
That's true, but it was a combination of the fact that there was no trash and it was a teeny tiny little dungeon, but it had all of the eye level upgrades that you would expect from a new tier. So it's basically you had to go and do TOC, you rent that out in 2 hours, and then you had all these people that had booked 2 to 5 nights a week in order to do stuff that just had nothing else to do. So they would go back and do Ulduar or just not do anything. That actually, I remember that broke a few guilds. I don't think they did anything like that in Cataclysm. I don't remember off the top of my head, but I think all the tiers...
Yeah, the first tiers had several instances that were smaller bosses, but there was multiple instances. So overall, for the tier, you had a fairly large number of bosses, just like we have this first tier in Mists of Pandaria. Yeah,
that was fine. And they've done like mini expansions before where they had like they reopened the drakes underneath the temple or something like that. Right. I don't know, RS, I forget what it's, Ruby Sanctum. Not a lot of people did that, but I mean, it was there. It wasn't too bad. So, what else do we have here? I think we have some stuff about... Okay, yeah, this is an interesting one. They were saying PvP gear in PvP and PvE is okay. They're actually pretty happy with the way that turned out. As am I, by the way, because you can hit level 90, you can go to the auction house, spend a bit of gold, and end up with a full set of 450 blues, which are, the greatest way to start doing 5-mans, And even though it's PvP gear, it's not like you're spending any itemization on resilience or on PvP power, which doesn't help you against the boss. It's the same number of itemization levels or whatever as a 450 PvE blue. Now the problem is this does not scale back to PvE, straight to PvP. If you want to take your high-end raiding gear and jump back into battlegrounds, even in high-end raiding gear, you're just going to get blown up instantly, and you're not going to be doing more damage than somebody who has sort of the entry-level PvP stuff. Like if they went out and they bought, their 4-piece Conquest or their 4-piece Crafted, I think it's Conquest. No, it's not. Whatever. Their 4-piece Crafted, and then they went and bought their 4-piece Honor, and then maybe got some lucky drops off of Shah or whatever. Plus their 2 trinkets. Even without a weapon, they will hit so much harder than somebody in raid gear. It's just insane. So that's what I think he was saying. He wants to make it so that if you have decent raiding gear and you want to go back into PvP, you shouldn't feel completely useless like you do now.
Yeah. Which is fine as long as there needs to be some, obviously delineation, or else people will try and find the fastest route to, sort of progression as far as gear is concerned. And I think you want people who like PvE doing PvE things and vice versa.
Yeah, and they don't mind a bit of crossover. Like they want the ability to cross over, but it sounds like they want to make it so that if you're a raider and you start doing PvP, you shouldn't have to start off in greens. You should be able to use your stuff as a replacement for whatever the money or honor bot stuff is, and then of course work your way up from there to the proper conquest stuff. But right now, that is the case going PvP to PvE. If you're an arena person, you decide to start raiding, you're going to walk in there with all of your arena epics, and you'll be doing about as well as somebody with sort of mid to low end epic blue combination stuff. But it's not true the other way around. And I think that's what they want to make. And I'm not sure how they're going to accomplish that. So we had another point here, and we should probably go to Q&A soon if we want to have any chance doing it. Let's actually skip over this one here. Let's go on to the blue tweets and posts. Bestial Wrath nerf. People were complaining about Stampede, not Bestial Wrath. And then... Of course, he responds to somebody that says, "This was a critical mistake on your end." And Ghostcrawler's response was, "We nerfed Bestial Wrath and Avatar. We're regretting offensive abilities that prevent CC, encourages tunneling and burst." I liked having it. I miss having it. And I certainly understand why he took it away, because it was just so much fun. It's too powerful.
Yeah, and I think the importance there is just to clarify that this... I think we were perhaps under the impression that arena damage was too high and they didn't know the exact cause, so they started fixing a bunch of things, and then it was discovered that Stampede was the real issue, so they fixed that, but then they never undid the other things, and that it was sort of a bridge too far. But now you see here that no, this is something that particular nerf was something that they had planned to do, I guess, and they had a reason for doing it.
Yeah. Okay. So, at the risk of costing us even more Q&A time here, when you're doing PvP, there are different phases, right? So when you pop some cooldowns, you try and stack them all together, and you just unload on someone. That is a very critical time. You will kill someone if they're not properly defended, or if they can't stop you somehow. And those are the two things that you can do. You can have a healer sort of stand back and tunnel heal. You can have the person pop a cooldown and survive, like the bubble or whatever, deterrence. Or the other option is you could just CC the hunter. As soon as you see him turn red, trap his pet, trap the hunter, just do something. Line of sight him if you have to. Do something to kind of like trip him up and make him waste all that valuable pressure. And then you have to wait 90 seconds or for readiness, or make him blow readiness. Mm-hmm. That is an example of if you can Bestial Wrath your way through anything that's thrown at you, like what I would do, and when I was just doing random battlegrounds, is I would pop all my stuff, knowing that eventually, that little warlock would be like, "Oh, I'm not going to allow this," and just like fear me, and then I'd hit Bestial Wrath, and I'd just charge in and just destroy everything in my path. It was just like, it's an unmitigatable amount of pressure, and this is allowing them to mitigate it. So, now I don't pop everything all at once. What I'll do is I'll pop a trinket so it looks like I popped Bestial Wrath. Then I'll get CC'd, and then I'll pop Bestial Wrath to get out of it, and then next CC will only be diminishing returns. So, anyways, I think that's enough on that for today. Okay, we've got 5 minutes left. How much Q&A do we have? Can anyone see that?
Yeah, we have 0, so we can just carry on.
Okay, let's keep going then. Buffing hunters in PvE. You want to read this one?
Yeah, so he said, any chance, this was again on Twitter, I believe, he said, any chance you're going to buff Hunter in terms of PvE, especially Marksman, since we as a pure DPS class can't compete even with Hybrid. And then, of course, he said, can you provide specific examples where a Hybrid is beating you for us to look at? And this is one of these like ongoing threads, so. And then someone said, well, do you want us to provide anecdotal evidence? That seems more unreliable than the top 100 parsers. To which he said, just saying that the top 100 can measure skill or just who managed to get a lot of crits. Looking at all parsers can be better. Which then carried on to saying, aren't those top parsers filled with players ignoring mechanics, being fed tricks, etc., old tier set abuses? And he's saying, unfortunately, it takes a lot of detective work to tell, but best source are logs from reliable raiders, but I know not all are public. So I guess it was just a little bit of back and forth about trying to get the information
complaining
to justify whether or not a buff is required in a certain place or not.
Yeah, I suspect that what this player should have done is just sent him a link to a World of Logs report, but maybe he was embarrassed because he had done something silly or something. And anyways, I don't think anybody's arguing that Marks is more damage than any of the other specs, and I don't think Ghostcrawler would argue that either, but a hybrid, meaning like a feral druid or a ret paladin or basically anything other than a warlock, a rogue, a mage, I think that's it, shouldn't, in theory, be able to do more damage than us with the same gear. And what he would probably see is that, yes, you are being out-damaged, but you're being out-damaged by somebody with a lot better gear than you. So,
yeah.
Anyways.
Yeah, go ahead.
Hmm?
Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead. I was going to say the next one was about disengage. Did you have anything else to add to the other one?
No, there was someone who talked about marksman, whether or not it should have unique utility, like giving them like the glyph of concussive shot and making that a passive. And he just went on to say that not a huge fan of unique utility for DPS specs in the same class. So I feel like the raid makes the choice of spec, not you.
Yeah, that's fair enough.
So.
Here's one. He says, why can't I disengage uphill? And the answer was, the game does a lot of line-of-sight checks on terrain changes, particularly to prevent exploits. Not ideal, but unfortunately unavoidable. And I wish I could disengage uphill as well. But conversely, when you're disengaging downhill, the fact that you can't disengage uphill means that you can disengage a lot further downhill.
True.
And so that means that we have an opportunity to do all kinds of stupid things. Like if you're an engineer, you can get into combat and then jump off the side of the wall in one of the battlegrounds and disengage backwards, sends you flying far, and then you use your engineering stuff to basically cross most of the map in one swoop. And that's the kind of thing that would not be possible if you could disengage uphill. So that's just something I'm gonna say that we're probably gonna have to live with. Let's do a last Twitter and then get out for the week. The last one here is about the power shot bug. Somebody had asked him, speaking of bugs, what about power shot? He says, I keep hearing about this, but it doesn't reproduce easily. Does it ever happen on target dummies who don't move? And he said the response was, on dummies it hits 100%, but on actual players that's another story. His response is, it is a skill shot like Divine Star, so we can miss targets that move. That may be what players are seeing. Not that is what players are seeing, that may be what players are seeing. Now, this is something I've actually heard thrown around before. I've never used Divine Star, but I don't know what he means by skill shot. So if somebody moves, does that mean, because it's not like a targeting reticule as far as I know, it's a cast bar.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe I don't know what Divine Star does. I was thinking maybe skill shot in the sense of like glaive toss, for example, where it depending on how you use it. I mean, it's designed to hit multiple targets, but if let's say you've got 4 or 5 targets kind of lined up in front of each other, but you've got you're just targeting the first in line. I think that's all you're going to hit. You're not. Whereas if you were to target the one in the back, you're going to hit all 5. With the one glaive toss. So it's something along those lines, perhaps.
Yeah, but that's not the situation here because glaive toss doesn't miss. Power shot has been referred to as a skill shot, as in that is a mechanic that it uses. So this is a mechanic that I'm not familiar with. I think this might be the first one that hunters have. Aim shot used to be something that would never miss if you were hit capped, as an example. And I think that this is something that even if you are hit capped, depending on how they how the target moves, that it might miss. So that's something that I'll have to look up for next time, a skill shot. That said, I'm pretty sure that it is still bugged. It's either bugged or it's underpowered, because if it is intended to miss moving targets, then it becomes a lot less useful in PvP. So,
all right. Well, just looking up Divine Star real quick. Here's the tooltip for that. It says, fires a Divine Star in front of you, traveling 24 yards, causing blah, blah, blah. Divine damage to all enemies and healing to all allies within 6 yards of its path. And then after it's reaching its destination, it will return to you, also dealing damage and healing to all targets in its path. So it almost sounds exactly like Glaive Toss. A lot like Glaive Toss.
That does sound a lot like
so,
except that's weird.
Yeah. So I think that's what he's talking about with a skill shot. It's depending on how you line it up and use it, you may get more or less benefit. Like, obviously Glaive Toss is going to hit one target, and maybe you have to look up Power Shot again and see exactly, because like you said, outside
Power Shot
it's PvP,
not like that,
no one ever uses it.
Yeah, exactly. No, but Power Shot in PvP is supposed to be you target someone, you Power Shot them, and it hits them, and I believe anybody between you and them. And they all get knocked back and take a ton of damage. That's what.
It says you wind up a powerful shot which deals 800% weapon damage to the target and 400% weapon damage to all enemies in between you and the target. It says enemies hit by Power Shot are also knocked back. So I don't know if I don't think it's a multi knockback. I always thought it was a single knockback, right?
Yeah, everybody gets knocked back once, but I think the knockback on your primary target might be further. But the issue is that if you wind up this shot and it takes so long to cast, and then it goes off and it just misses the person that you hit, even though you're hit capped, that's what's happening. So I don't know if this is something that they can't reproduce or something that's intended. If it's intended, then this shot is underpowered. Glaive Toss is always better.
Yeah, absolutely.
If they were to increase the damage so that even when the thing is, it can't be 100. It can't be that anybody who knows how to avoid it can always avoid it, because that would just be the only people that Power Shot works on are the people that don't know it's coming or don't know how to deal with it.
Right.
That's not the kind of thing they like to put into PvP, because that really favors more experienced. That basically means like really experienced hunters who fight other really experienced players will never take it, and really inexperienced hunters who only fight inexperienced players will always take it. And that's not the kind of gap that they like to have. Typically.
No, and honestly, the fact that this is coming up now and hasn't been mentioned since day one, or hasn't been around for a long time.
Yeah, people have been complaining about this ever since the first Gladiators hit 90. They said Power Shot's broken. They said we can't reproduce it. Look, it hits a target dummy. They said, okay, well, it's not hitting players, and something about skill shot, and then this is where we're at now. So. Anywho, we have to do our outro if we want to have any chance of making it under an hour. So you have been listening to episode 153 of the Hunting Party Podcast. This is Euripides from Out DPS, WoW Insider, and Call to Auction Podcast, and soon to be Cuba for a week.
And I'm Dark Brew from thebrewhall.com and the Brew Hall on Twitter.
Frosttime is AFK dealing with sound card issues, but we'll be back next week, hopefully.
And I'm Alexander from the Hunting Party Podcast. You can check us out on iTunes, YouTube, Stitcher, or at our RSS feed to your reader. Links available on the show notes.
Also, if you like us, please don't be shy about leaving us a review on iTunes or YouTube, especially one when you mention how many spore bats you keep stabled.
I can't believe you passed up the alternate line.
I know.
I figured, you know what? I'm feeling generous. My first day of vacation.
You can submit a title for this week's show by emailing us at huntingpartypodcast@gmail.com and have your name mangled on air by professionals.
All right, stay thirsty, my friends. Remember to drink your dark brew lager.
Don't forget to spear neuter your feral druid.
For the horde. And don't forget to pay your dues.
There you go. I think I'm actually going to probably name this episode Canadian Communists Visits Caribbean Comrades in Cuba. Maybe not. I don't even know if it's real communist. I mean, old-fashioned communist. I think it's just sort of a, dictatorship government where nobody can own a company. Then it is a communist, whatever. But I am not going to do anything but sit on the beach.
Cuba, who immigrated on a boat. He's violently anti-communist. So, according to him, it's communist Cuba. They just hide it from you tourists.
Probably. but it's not my problem to solve. I'm there to, you know what though? It's an all-inclusive vacation. I'm not going to get my money's worth. I can't, I don't drink that much normally, and especially bringing kids, you're not going to go get hammered when you have kids with you. So, I feel like I'm paying for everybody else's alcohol around me. So they're really getting, they're getting. I'm not getting my money's worth. They're getting a very good deal off. So.
I can jump shot, BM, MM, and SB. I can rock out any tree. Never worried about my threat, 'cause I've got FD and misdirect. Catching loose mobs in my traps. I never miss, 'cause I am hit capped. 'Cause I'm the hunter, not the marked. I'm the fighter, not the spark. I'm the kiter, not the kite. I'll top the meters every fight. Rated in the game, dealing death. Just me, my gun, and my trusty bed. Now let's begin with Illidan, Osirian, and Kil'jaeden, Magdamar, Asgalor, Gruul, Cthulhu, and Razorgore, Onyxia to Ragnaros,